Hey everybody, welcome back to Rob's Arcade. Don't go anywhere, I got a really cool video coming right up. Hang tight.
Rob's Arcade, Rob's Arcade, where the games get played and the games get saved so they can be played on another day. Rob's Arcade.
All right, hey there, welcome back everybody. We are counting down the days to the new year, and as we count down to the new year, I wanted to do a countdown with you guys and share some of like the top moments or things that have influenced me and kept me collecting comics. I'm getting ready to turn 45 with this new year, and it's like, one of those questions like, what keeps you coming back to comics day after day, year after year? Why are you so into it? So I thought I would take a look at some of the things that occurred early in my life that were an influence and have kept me coming back to this medium for quite some time. So real quick, let's just take a look at some of the top 10 moments that have influenced my comic book love. Here we go, real fast. All right, so number one would probably be that little comic book spindy wheel that appeared in the grocery store when I was about 10 years old or so. Like, this wasn't something that was always a staple in our grocery store. Like, we didn't always have a little spinny rack, but I remember when that occurred, my father started picking up comics for my sister and I, and that really was like one of those kickoff moments that allowed me access to this comic book world. Like, a lot of the drugstores, grocery stores in our neighborhood didn't have these kind of comics and magazines. So when the grocery store right across the street put in one of those little spinny racks, and I think I'm talking about the little like red comic spinny racks, like, I don't know, 4 sides, 8 or so slots along. It was awesome. It was one of those moments that really changed my life. Number 9 would have to be trading cards. These were available in all the stores, 7-Elevens, grocery stores, everything like that in my neighborhood. So when my sister and I couldn't get to the comic shop or there were no new comics out, we had our comic book cards. And back in the day, they made trading cards for everything from TV shows to movies, comic book characters. Of course, you had your baseball cards and all of those things. But these were what kind of kept us coming back to the comic book world when we weren't able to get to the comic shop. We would just buy packs and packs and packs of these, trying to collect them all. Coming in at number 8 would have to be like that 90s animation that I was exposed to, like the Batman animated series that came on Fox, and more importantly, probably the X-Men and the Spider-Man cartoons that came on Saturday morning on Fox as well, because those two shows especially set up the idea of that continuing a story each week, not missing an episode. And I remember, coming home from school or being out with some friends and missing an episode of Batman and not really being that bummed out as much as I enjoyed that show and as beautiful as that show was. But when I would miss an episode of the X-Men or Spider-Man back in the 90s on Saturday morning, I remember getting really upset because I would be lost. Like, what happened the week before when I finally caught up and I was finally able to see the next episode? I might get a recap, but it really helped to develop that idea of that continuing story and that ongoing, kind of almost like a soap opera, if you will, and the importance of collecting each issue and following the story along as it develops. Even if it's like many soap operas, it tells the same story over and over and over and over again. It instills something very important in comic book collecting and storytelling that I still enjoy, to this day. So I mentioned the comic book spinny rack that we had at the grocery store. At some point, my father started taking us to actual comic shops, and that became something that not a lot of my friends did. Even some of my friends who were into comics, they would just basically get their comics from, the grocery store. Being able to go to these weekly trips and seeing these comic shops, it was an eye-opener for me. They blew my mind as to like how one store could contain this whole little world of, Spider-Man and Batman and all these different heroes. And so my father taking us to these stores, like on a weekly, bi-weekly, a bi-monthly basis really helped to, fuel that love for comics and for reading as well. Like that's where I got the material that I read throughout, middle school and high school was from the comic shops. And it was those weekly trips that really like shoveled that coal into that fire for my love of comic books. Number 6 kind of falls in line with the DC, the DC Batman animated series. The DC Batman movie, the 89 Michael Keaton film, Batman Returns, the animated series. That whole movement really hit at the right time with me. I was just the right age. It came out just at the right time and really was one of those things that if it hadn't come along when it did, I don't know that I would have been into Batman as much as I am today, or as much as I am into comics and comic book movies and comic book animation. Those 3 pieces really is what sparked my interest for the live action and the animated portion of that comic book world and superheroes and all of that. Number 5 would probably have to be the creation of Image Comics. That also was one of those things that just seemed to pop off at the right time when I was the right age. So yeah, when I was about 12 years old, Image Comics debuted and started putting out some of the most intense comic book stories and art that I had, and still to this day have ever come across. It still holds up as one of those companies that likes to shock and all their readers. And like I said, I was about 12 years old, and when this stuff hit the newsstands, I was just salivating at the mouth. Had all those hormones running through me, pre-teenager, and it was like a rated R comic book in the palm of your hand. I just, what is not to love about Image Comics? So with Image comic books, what was that coming in at number 5? 4 is going to have to be Mr. Todd McFarlane himself. He was just not only one of the co-founders of Image Comics and the creator of one of my favorite titles out of that company, Spawn, but just what he did with all of his comic book art, with the Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man, the stories that he told. And again, I was just at that right age, just waiting for something like this to come along. So when he hit the Spider-Man title and started telling these really gritty, dark stories, and then moved on to Image Comics and started putting out even darker and even more grittier material, and the action figures that followed and the trading cards and everything that he just touched, he became as much as Stan Lee is my Stan Lee. He became the Stan Lee of my generation. Number 3 would probably have to be the comic book shop opening up right across the street from my house when I was a teenager, about 14, 15 years old or so. And again, it was just one of those things that had it not come along, I don't know if I would still be into comics as much as I am today. It was not only a great shop, but the owner was amazing as well. The people who worked there, the staff, it was just a really cool place to hang out. And that's what it was for me. It really was a hangout. I almost think about it as sort of Norman Rockwellian dream of mine that it almost didn't even exist. Like this comic book shop, there's no way this comic book shop could have existed across the street to somebody who, you know, who comic books meant so much to. It just almost seemed like impossible, or almost like I said, a fairy tale part of a childhood that you would only hope was true. And I had the blessing of actually living across the street, walking distance to a comic shop where I could save my lunch money and buy my favorite titles. And it became a place where I just went all the time. If I was ever sad, alone, I could just sit there with all of my super friends and have a really great time. Gosh, I remember like walking past the store and seeing it like come to life, and actually walking in there for the very first time, and just, you know, again, feeling like I was walking into a piece of a dream. So keeping in tune with that, number 2 would have to be the owner of the comic shop, and also my father, 2 men who are no longer with us. But they were huge influences on me and my love for comic books. The owner of the comic shop, James, was a sweetheart of a man. Would, you know, I guess most times when we see like comic book owners in movies and shows, they're kind of grouchy or dorky, or, you know, they're shooing kids out of the store. And he always welcomed me in. He always welcomed my sister in, and would actually like hold things for my, like, you know, I have this book. I didn't know if you wanted. I saved you a couple. Here's a couple of issues. Or before I put this on the shelf, I thought you might want to check this out. And he was just a really great person, and really helped to support that love for comics just as much as my father did. You know, my father grew up probably reading Superman and Batman and things like that, but he was never a huge comic book nerd or a huge video game player or any of that. But he really supported my love for this. You know, like he realized, like, you know, football and basketball wasn't my thing, and never pushed me into sports or to try out for the team if it's something I didn't want to do. But he definitely supported my love for comics, and just, you know, he was the one who funded my comic book buying every week, and was the one driving me to the comic shops, and the one that would, you know, go to these really cool comic shops downtown and have boxes for me where, you know, the owners would actually, you know, keep my titles and hold my titles for me. So they were there for me, you know, every month when we went to go pick them up. So if it wasn't for my father and James, I don't know, I probably would not be as into Spider-Man and Batman as I am today. All right, and coming in at number 1 is this guy, Creepshow. This is the movie adaptation and the book, really, that started it all. Written by Stephen King, directed by George A. Romero. My sister and I would like fight over this and read it in some creepy, weird, like, you know, movie read along where, you know, each panel mimics the movie perfectly. And so we would sit down in front of the TV and just flip through this bad boy page for page, scene for scene. And it's this book that led my father to start picking up comic books for us and got us into Creepshow. And then that spiraled into Spider-Man and Batman, and here we are today. Here we are. And I want to thank you for being here. That's it. That's all I have for you guys. Just wanted to share some of the moments that, you know, hopefully now you would like, well, why wouldn't Robert love comic books? I mean, look at all the cool things he got to experience growing up in, you know, his teenage years. So hopefully that answers some questions for you and for myself. Please leave a comment down below, like the video, share it, subscribe, all that jazz. I've got another countdown. We're going to be doing countdowns. You know, it's the 10, 9, 8 to the ball drops and all that. Counting down the new year. Tune in. Make sure you don't miss my top 10 books that influenced my comic book love. So that'll be coming up next. Thank you so much for hanging out, you guys. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. See you soon.